The Gate, Part 5 of the Mind Unbuilt series by the Mercer Journal. Episode 4 ended with a tension left unresolved. The second eye was named, the organizing process catching itself in the act, the channel through which witnessed experience writes back into the structure of the receiver. And it ended with this, the catch surfacing one truth, the story already running telling another. That tension has a structure. Episode 5 is about that structure. One thing worth stating before proceeding. What follows remains functional description of how the architecture appears to behave under conflict, not prescription, not a program for change. A map of what seems to happen at the moment when accurate signal and familiar narrative meet. The two signals. The first eye produces narrative, coherent, continuous, emotionally familiar. It connects this moment to the last, projects forward, maintains the story of who you are and what is happening. It is fast, fluent, and compelling. It has been running since before you had language for it. It feels like home, even when home is wrong. The second eye produces something different, brief, pre-verbal, structural. It catches the organizing process in the act, watches the coloring as the experience passes through, notices what the receiver is actually doing rather than what the narrative says it is doing. It is quieter, slower, and often less comfortable. Both are real, both are operating, and they don't always agree. The problem isn't that one exists and the other doesn't. The problem is that they sometimes point in opposite directions, and the conflict resolves somehow. The Gate. The gate is that moment of resolution. When first eye narrative and second eye signal diverge, the conflict appears to resolve at a level deeper than explicit reasoning alone. Thinking your way through it applies surface pressure to a gravitational system, the conscious layer addressing a process that isn't receiving at that level. What determines the outcome is not intelligence or insight. It is something closer to willingness, the deliberate suspension of the narrative override, the choice to let the signal stand without immediately editing back into the existing story. Volition does not appear to be manufactured by effort alone or reasoned into existence. It can only be brought. That is why the gate is the critical moment in any genuine change, not the insight, not the decision, the moment at the gate where something either opens or closes. Why the first eye usually wins. The first eye has structural advantages that need to be named honestly. The narrative is legible, it is familiar, it carries the accumulated weight of prior self-story and connects to everything already written. It feels like home even when home is wrong. Accepting it costs nothing in the short term. The gate closing is the path of least resistance. Automatic, fast, and usually below the threshold of awareness. Second eye signal arrives without the rhetorical force that language carries. It is often threatening to the existing story, not because it is hostile, but because accurate perception of the receiver's actual operation frequently diverges from the narrative the receiver has built about itself. And it requires tolerating the open loop, sitting with what surface without immediately converting it into something the story can absorb. The first eye doesn't win because it is right. It wins because it is easier. But this is not the whole picture, and missing the rest produces a distortion. The first eye is also where agency lives. It is the seat of values, future projection, and the choice to change. The second eye catches what is currently written in the receiver. The first eye is where the response to what is written gets formed, including the recognition that what is written does not have to remain what is written. The narrator is both the one who locks the gate automatically and the only one who holds the key to open it deliberately. The problem is not the narrative. It is the automatic closing that happens before the narrative has a chance to do anything with what surfaced. What surfaces may be uncomfortable. Anyone who develops genuine second eye capacity and uses it at a high signal moment will eventually catch something that doesn't fit the story. Not a small dissonance, something that lands hard. Consider a moment of love. A mother having a special moment, perhaps a birthday with her child, one of the most easily recognizable forms of committed love. In the middle of that moment, something surfaces that looks nothing like love at all. A flash of something, coloring that the narrative immediately rejects as impossible as unforgivable as evidence of something that must not be true. The first eye's response is immediate and predictable. If I feel this, something is wrong with me. The gate slams. But this is a misreading of what the second eye caught. The catch is data about the receiver's current structure, not a verdict on character. What surfaces is what is currently written. What is written includes things that were never chosen, never endorsed, never part of the conscious self-narrative. The catch tells us what is currently written, not how it got there, not what it means about who you are. What is written can be rewritten. The catch is not the conclusion. It is, if the gate stays open, the beginning of the work. But the reader needs to know this before the encounter, not after, because the instinct when something uncomfortable surfaces is to let the gate close immediately. That instinct is understandable. It is also exactly what keeps the structure unchanged. Willpower at the wrong layer. Most attempts at change apply force at the conscious layer. Decide harder, commit more firmly, hold the intention with greater discipline. The conscious layer is the ignition. The decision to change can only originate there, but the architecture does not appear to change simply because conscious intention demands that it change. Surface pressure against gravitational pull. The architecture that holds prior rights operates at a completely different scale than the conscious intention. You cannot push a planet with your hands. One sequence that appears capable of producing structural change is different. Conscious layer decides and arranges conditions, then steps back. Actual experience passes through the second eye repeatedly. The right accumulates. The architecture shifts, not because it was forced, but because it was written. Before sufficient writing, the existing structure is still pulling in the old direction. Willpower burning against gravity with no return signal. Most change attempts fail in this window. Not because the method is wrong, but because the writing phase requires holding conditions without the architecture helping yet. After sufficient writing, the architecture begins generating pull in the new direction. Not a decision, not an effort, a tug that arrives below the threshold of deliberate thought because the structure itself has changed. The ignition is no longer needed because the engine is running. What the gate asks. The gate doesn't ask for intelligence. It doesn't ask for insight or understanding or even agreement with what the second eye caught. It asks for willingness to let accurate signals stand without immediately closing it into the existing story, to let the camera run without editing the tape, to tolerate the open loop long enough for what surfaced to settle into something true rather than something the narrative can immediately absorb. This is not passive. It is one of the most active things a person can do at the interior level. But it operates differently than effort. It is closer to consent than to force. The listener can locate this in their own experience. The moment when something surfaced, a catch, a recognition, a coloring that didn't fit the story, and the story closed back over it almost immediately. That closing is the gate shutting. What it would have taken to hold it open a little longer, not forever, just long enough, is what this article has been pointing toward. In closing, the gate is where genuine change either begins or doesn't, not at the level of insight or decision, but at the level of willingness to let second eye signals stand against first eye narrative long enough for the first eye to do something with it. What that produces, when the gate stays open and sufficient writing accumulates, is not an updated set of beliefs. The receiver itself changes. The same signals arrive but convert differently because the structure they arrive into has been restructured. The person doesn't emerge with different views. They emerge as a different interpreter. What that transformation actually is and what it means for identity, that is Article 6. Next, what changes when the interpreter changes, and what that means for everything the receiver will ever convert. This is part 5 of the series The Mind Unbuilt. To follow along and explore the mind, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for listening.